Okay, welcome. Let's start with our motivation. So start with where you are right now. Why did you come here right now? Or why did you join in online? What was the thought behind it? Was it just, this is what I do on Thursday night? Or what was the motivation? And in the morning when we get up and we kind of think about what we're going to do that day, when it comes to the evening teachings, do we think, oh, good, I'm going to learn the Dharma for the benefit of sentient beings? Or do we just think, well, there's class tonight? So it's good when we review what we're going to do during the day, in the morning, to really think specifically of the value of everything we're doing and motivate specifically for that activity, really seeing how we can create virtue when we do it. So it isn't just, well, this is this day, so this is what I do, but now here's an opportunity to be of benefit to sentient beings, or here's the opportunity to learn the Dharma and transform my mind. And I think especially for the monastics in these days, since we're doing the pravarana, right, to really think, oh, I have the fortune to do pravarana, and this will help establish the Sangha and the Dharma in the West. And so see the long-term effects of what we're doing and how it will influence others in a positive way. And so seeing that tonight we have the opportunity to learn about reasoning and how to think clearly so that we can examine and analyze and investigate the Dharma well, and investigate how things actually exist. And seeing that we have that fortune, let's make sure we have a good motivation and we appreciate the opportunity in front of us right now. Okay, did anybody, you have any syllogisms that you want to share?
Consider the subject, the Abbey mudita. She is empty of being a mental factor because she is a cat.
Okay, so go through it.
The subject, mudita, the Abbey mudita, is a cat. Right?
That's the subject.
That's the subject. The
predicate
is she is empty of being a mental factor.
Okay.
And the reason is because she is a cat.
Okay. So what kind of argument is this?
I think it's an object of non-observation.
Yeah.
Okay, so the presence of the reason in the subject, the Abbey mudita is a cat.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. Anything that is a cat is necessarily empty of being a mental factor. I think that's true.
I think that's true. A cat is in the category of persons.
Yes.
So it's an abstract phenomena. A mental factor is in the category of consciousnesses. So those two categories are mutually exclusive. Okay. So, Mudita, are you okay? Okay, then?
And then in the continuing series of Amitabha ones, I have many, many, many. When I finish it, I'll submit them.
Okay.
But one of them is the subject, the Infinite Life Sutra, is a reliable source of information because it was spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
So the subject, the Infinite Life Sutra, The predicate is a reliable source of information. Because it was spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha is the reason. So the presence of the reason in the subject, the Infinite Life Sutra was spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha. The pervasion, anything that is spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha is a reliable source of information.
Now, how do you know that?
The subject, Shakyamuni Buddha, is a reliable source of information because he has eliminated all faults, developed unfathomable love and compassion and all good qualities, and has no reason to lie. How do I know that? Well, that's a good question.
Yeah. So this gets into the reasoning, the scriptural reasoning, okay? And scriptural reasoning, I don't think is watertight. I think it's very good and it goes in a certain direction, but I don't think that you can necessarily make it watertight unless you bring in, unless you're somebody who's very astute and you can figure out what is interpretable, what is definitive, what the Buddha's intention was when he spoke to different audiences. So if you're somebody who can tell all of that, yeah.
I cheated a little bit because I looked up how to do that in the Pramanavartika thing. And it would say the Amitabha Sutra is, this was that wording, is incontrovertible with respect to the existence of the Pure Land because of being a text that is pure by way of the three analyses.
Right.
Right. But
that's what you do.
Last week I knew what the three analyses are, but now I can't remember them.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. I remember.
I can.
You know, one is that, this is in volume 2, by the way, that the earlier and later parts don't contradict.
Yes.
And
it's not.
That other things that were said in the sutra are reliable. And I can't remember the third one. You want to look it up, or should I?
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
That's it.
That's the thing that I was just referring to. That it's reliable in terms of the other things that it's talked about. Threefold analysis, page 39.
Yes. Manifest, slightly hidden. Oh no, that's wrong. Sorry.
Okay. So here I have it, the first criteria, that the statement is not contradicted by direct perception of evident phenomena. Okay. Then another one is that the scripture lacks internal contradictions. Okay, so different parts don't jive. Oh, here it is. Okay, so there's no reason to reject the statement or scripture in terms of its presentation of evident phenomena. To assess this, we examine if its presentation of evident phenomena can be refuted by direct perception. And 2, there is no reason to reject this statement or scripture in terms of its presentation of slightly obscure phenomena. To assess this, we examine if its presentation of slightly obscure phenomena can be refuted by inference. And 3, there is no reason to reject this scripture in terms of its presentation of very obscure phenomena. To assess this, we examine 2 factors. 1, the scripture's explicit and implicit meanings are very obscure about very obscure phenomena are free from contradiction. So the explicit meaning is the evident theme of the scripture. The implicit meaning is other topics that are the basis. And then the second part of that is the former and later passages of its presentation of very obscure phenomena are free from contradiction. So what the scripture says in one place does not contradict what it says in another. Yeah. So the book's coming out in May. It's on page 34. The book is called Foundation of Buddhist Practice. Okay. May's coming soon, isn't it? Okay, so those are the criteria that you use to examine a sutra. Yeah. Now, so in terms of this, you would have to read the whole sutra and really examine, especially all the statements it makes about evident phenomena and slightly obscure and very obscure phenomena, and really test them out like that. So it takes, the point is, it takes a lot of intelligence and time and knowledge to really make that incontrovertible. I think it's we use it as going in a good direction to make that argument totally incontrovertible is difficult. That's my opinion.
I also was thinking that you can't really cite your scriptures as someone who doesn't believe in your scriptures.
Oh, right, it doesn't.
So it would depend on who is having this debate, if it would work.
Well, this is Tutanchini.
Yeah, she's proving it to herself. Yeah. So it's hard when we hear, for example, Amitabha's unshakable resolves. How do we know that they were fulfilled? But that doesn't just mean that we say, well, we can't prove it incontrovertibly, so we just accept, we don't even try, and we just accept everything on blind faith. It doesn't mean that either. Okay.
In working with these so far, it really comes down to proving the Buddha, to me, proving the Buddha as a reliable source.
Yeah. And that's where you use Dharmakirti's argument, that the Buddha is a reliable person because
He developed love and compassion.
he developed love and compassion.
And realized emptiness.
He realized emptiness. He became the teacher, the Sugata, the teacher, and then the protector. Yeah.
But I think it's a pretty good argument.
Yeah, it is a good argument, but you have to have some confidence in the Buddha for the argument really to make sense, because otherwise somebody could come up to you and say, well, Moses, said that, and he had compassion, and he had no reason to lie, and, and then where are you? Yeah, are you back believing the Bible?
No.
Okay. You have another? Somebody else have?
Somebody else?
Yeah.
I did 3.
This is in response to talking about our own growth.
Mm-hmm.
The subject Samton has more willingness to be a passenger in the car when Venerable Damcho is driving, because Venerable Damcho's driving skills have improved. So I think that this one is cause and effect. And the property is Samton is more willing to be a passenger when Venerable Damcho is driving.
Oh, wait a minute. Just say it slowly. Identify all the parts and all the criteria.
Okay, so the subject is Samton.
Uh-huh.
The predicate has more willingness to be a passenger in the car when Venerable Damcho is driving.
Uh-huh.
And the reason is because Venerable Damcho's driving skills have improved.
Okay.
So the pervasion is...
No, start with the property.
Okay, so the property is... where is it here? Samton's more willing to be a passenger.
No.
No?
The property is the subject and the reason. And the subject is Samton.
Right.
And the reason is because Venerable Damcho's driving skills have improved.
Well, that's a bit weird. So it doesn't work. Right? It doesn't work.
So how could you reword it so it might work?
She thinks.
Huh?
She thinks her driving is.
No, but we're trying to get the property, so where the subject and the reason, have something, and the reason applies to the subject. So the subject right now is something, and the reason is Venerable Damcha's driving skills, and so
Saying she would add Venerable Samson thinks Venerable Damcha's driving skills have improved. That's the reason. Because Venerable Samson is more willing to get in the car. Because she thinks because Venerable Samson thinks.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So that Venerable Samson is the subject, and then because she thinks Venerable Damcha's, Okay.
Put a verb in there.
Okay.
You could also do because Venerable Samson has overcome her fear of death.
Okay, then try the pervasion. What's the pervasion?
The way I wrote it.
No, the way, because now we have to alter it. If Venerable Samson thinks that Venerable Damcha's driving skills have improved,
She necessarily is more willing to be a
passenger
passenger
in the car.
driving.
yeah. All the time?
I would say no.
But it's more willing. Like there's some,
It's like all or none.
Yeah, that's all or nothing.
Yeah.
it's all or nothing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's more willing. Okay, she's more willing then. Does that mean she gets in the car or not?
Okay, this is not so good.
Okay. She's more willing, but then what's the result of that? Yeah, is she going to get in the car? Is she going to, faint beforehand?
Okay, it's a work in progress.
Okay, good.
So I have two, but I'll start with the most the most recent development first. The subject, Nima's cooking skills. Have improved because she has received intensive training in the kitchen.
Okay, so go through, tell us the parts and the criteria.
So the property is...
No, start with the parts.
Okay, so the subject is Nima's cooking skills.
Okay.
The predicate is have improved.
Okay.
Reason, because she has received intensive training in the kitchen.
Okay.
And the property of the subject is Nima's cooking skills have received intensive training in the kitchen. That's not a problem there.
That's not quite it, is it?
Pardon? No, that's not quite right. No, that's not quite right. Nima's cooking skills have improved. Mm-hmm. Is that the property? Is have improved? I know that's the predicate.
No, that's the predicate.
The predicate. So so the property is not working quite right with this one.
Yeah.
Has received intensive cooking instructions.
Yeah, but then also, if you've received intensive in cooking instructions, have your skills necessarily improved?
They put, you're already on to the provision. I was just on the.
Okay. Yeah.
And has followed them. Received them and followed them.
Yeah, but then how do you still making the property? Yeah, you need the received and followed.
Yeah.
Yeah, from somebody who's a good cook, also in there. Not intensive training for me. Yeah. I used to be a good cook when I was a layperson. Yeah.
Venerable Nima is a person whose cooking skills has improved because she has learnt many new skills in the kitchen.
Okay, then do the proper.
So the subject would be Venerable Nima. Mm-hmm. The predicate is a person whose cooking skills have improved.
Uh-huh.
And the reason would be because she's learnt many new skills in the kitchen.
Okay.
And so then the property would be Venerable Nima has learnt many new skills in the kitchen. That's true. Mm-hmm. And then the pervasion would be anyone who's learnt many new skills in the kitchen is a person who's necessarily improved their cooking skills.
Could learn dishwashing skills.
Yeah, you need to be a little bit more precise. Has learned new cooking skills from a qualified good cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So if you do it that way, Venerable Nima is a person who has, yeah.
So this is with respect to the subject, the monastics of Sravasti Abbey. For them, virtuous seeds in their mind streams in a previous life existed, because for them, having become a monastic in this lifetime exists.
Okay, so go through the...
So the subject is the monastics of Sravasti Abbey. Mm-hmm. And the predicate is, of the probatum is, virtuous, for them, virtuous seeds in their mind streams in a previous life existed.
You would, I think, better to word it, have had, well, because for them, they had virtuous.
I don't know, I had trouble when I went through it, and I had to rewrite it to get, this is how I wrote it.
Okay.
I don't know. And then the sign was, the reason was, for them, having become a monastic in this lifetime exists. Because I think this is why I did this, because then I could get it to work for the pervasion, which is then for whoever has become a monastic in this lifetime, whomever necessarily they have, for them, virtuous seeds in their mind streams in a previous life existed.
Yeah. It might be better to reword it the way she did with Nima's cooking. Mm-hmm. The virtuous, the monastics of Sravasti Abbey are persons who, what's your predicate? Are persons who
have virtuous seeds in their mind streams from the previous life.
No, that's your reason, isn't it?
No, that's the predicate. Because that had to be a bigger one.
Okay.
Bigger. Right. So use the microphone.
Okay, so you're reasoning from the result.
The predicate, so it would be a bigger circle than the
so
reason.
they're persons who had virtuous seeds in their mind stream in previous lives because
they are persons who have become a monastic in this lifetime.
Okay. So then now okay, so now do the criteria.
Okay, so then the pervasion.
No, start
the subject,
with
the property.
Property.
Okay, the monastics at Sravasti Abbey are persons who have become monastics in this lifetime. True. And then the pervasion, persons, whoever are persons who have become monastics in this lifetime. Are necessarily persons who had virtuous seeds in their mind streams in a previous life.
Who had maybe planted virtuous seeds in their mind streams.
Wouldn't you also need an aspiration to be a monastic in future life? Because virtuous seeds don't necessarily ripen.
Yeah, but she's not necessarily talking about all the... No, she's saying if there's a person who's a monastic this life, then they necessarily created. There are somebody who whoever they were in a previous life necessarily created virtuous seeds. Okay, it doesn't mean that that's the only cause for becoming a monastic. Okay, so if we remember that, yeah, no, I think this thing of, because we're trying to make reasons, and I think this way of doing it, the person is a person who, because they're, a person, da-da-da-da-da, yeah, then you can make the three things hang together.
The subject, the three jewels, are Semke's best friends because they benefit Semke by teaching and encouraging her to practice virtue. Okay. So the subject is the three jewels. Predicate is are Semke's best friends. Reason is because they benefit Semke by teaching and encouraging her to practice virtue. Pervasion is whatever.
No, you always start with the property.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Everybody's jumping to the pervasion first. You always start with the property.
The subject of three jewels benefits Semke by teaching and encouraging her to practice virtue. The pervasion is whatever benefits Semke by teaching and encouraging her to practice virtue necessarily are her best friends. That's what Semke thinks.
Sounds okay. People think?
Do you have any problem with the Dharma directly teaching?
With the Dharma what?
Directly teaching.
What do you mean? I don't understand.
I mean, in
the act of teaching, the Buddha teaches, the Sangha teaches, the Dharma is the teaching.
Yeah.
Right. So.
But does the Dharma benefit her by?
Yes. By teaching.
Oh, you said by teaching or by what?
By sitting. I can also just take teaching out.
Just say encouraging her to practice virtue.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You could say the Dharma teaches, though. By reading it, it teaches.
Yeah. Yeah, we can say this sutra teaches such and such. Yeah.
Okay, and then there are these other ones I'm not sure about. Okay, here's one I just needed to. It came into, I think, correct nature sign. Water is crucial to human beings' physical existence because of water's life-sustaining properties, which are moistening and hydrating. The subject is water. Predicate is crucial to human beings' physical existence. Reason is because of water's life-sustaining property, which are moistening and hydrating. The property of the subject is water's life-sustaining properties are moistening and hydrating. Pervasion is...
No, wait a minute. The subject was water.
Water.
And then water's properties.
Water's properties. So I was kind of making a one nature thing here. Yeah, it needs a predicate in there. Water.
was just crucial.
Yeah, but we're doing the property of the subject. So water
is
hydrating, moistening and hydrating.
Okay.
And then the pervasion is whatever is a life...
whatever is moistening and hydrating.
Whatever is moistening and hydrating is necessarily crucial to human beings' physical existence.
Okay, now P is moistening and hydrating.
It is crucial.
And it is crucial to eliminate it. To eliminate it, as is sweat and mucus and stuff comes out of your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. Or we could say cows pee.
Usually cows urine from messages.
So just because
it's water, does it mean?
No, just because it's moistening and hydrating doesn't necessarily mean it's essential for human existence.
So is lemonade.
Because,
So is lemonade. Coca-Cola.
Yeah, salt water.
But you're saying it's water, so that's H2O.
Yeah, no, but water is the subject. She's working now on the pervasion. So the pervasion is the reason. If it's the reason, it's the predicate. So if it's moistening and hydrating, then it's necessary for human life. Yeah. So yeah, is lemonade essential for human existence?
Well, I'm talking about water.
Some of that stuff makes you need more water.
No, that doesn't matter. We're talking about the relationship between the reason,
and hydrating.
between the reason and the predicate. Okay. Yeah. The property is the relationship between your subject water and the reasoning, moistening and hydrating. The pervasion is the relationship between the
predicate and the reason.
Between the reason and the predicate. So whatever, if it's moistening and hydrating, then it necessarily must be essential for human life.
Human life, right? Because what I was thinking is we didn't have water, the human body could not exist.
Right. Yeah, but that argument doesn't hold. Because if it's moistening and hydrating, it isn't necessarily necessary for human existence.
Because there's so many things. You could say Coca-Cola, you could say hand cream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coca-Cola has so much sugar, it makes you need more water. It's just like coffee and beer.
This is why I presented
They're not
this.
hydrating. They dehydrate
the whole idea about the different descriptions of the different elements. One is motility, one is moistening. So I wanted to see if it would hold up underneath a syllogism as far as a crucial element for.
Yeah.
What she's trying to say is there are many things that are moistening and hydrating. But they're not hydrating. I'm saying there are many things that are moistening and hydrating.
Yeah.
And so you can't make all of them necessary for life.
Yeah. We gave some examples. You may not accept those examples, but there's some examples that I'm sure you can accept.
Moistening and hydrating. Not necessarily for life. You can live without Gatorade.
The subject, Sravasti Abbey, is a unique Western monastery because it has a conventional, fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha.
Okay, now go
So
through.
the subject is Sravasti Abbey. The predicate is a unique Western monastery. The reason is because it has a conventional, fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha. The property of the subject is that because it has a...
No. The property of the subject, Sravasti Abbey.
Sravasti Abbey is a conventional, fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha.
Why do you need the word conventional in there?
Because I wanted to distinguish it from an arhat, which would be a Sangha.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And the pervasion would be whatever is a conventional, fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha is necessarily a unique Western monastery.
Luminary temples, not.
Yeah, luminary temple.
What about it?
It's a fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha, but it's not a unique Western monastery.
Why not?
Because it's in Taiwan. Okay, you want to reword it?
Put Western in the reason.
Exactly. Yeah, but Western in the reason.
Okay. So the subject, Sravasti Abbey, is a unique monastery because it has a conventional, fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha in the West.
That doesn't, but there's many monasteries that have fully qualified Bhikshuni Sanghas. Does that mean all of them are unique?
Actually, yes.
In this case, unique does not necessarily mean one.
So what does unique mean here?
It means that normally there is not a fully qualified Bhikshuni Sangha.
Okay. So if there's a fully qualified, then it's a unique monastery. Yeah, you would have to really define what unique means. Yeah. Because some people may, they may say, oh, but in Taiwan we have lots of bhikshuni monasteries. So that's the kind of you drive down the street and there's 10 of them.
Yeah, that's why in the West is in there.
So then you would have to put in the West in the reason.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
West in both predicate and reason, but also what does it sound like that?
Yeah. So then what would it be?
The subject Sravasti Abbey is a unique Western monastery because it has a fully qualified conventional Bhikshuni Sangha. Western Sangha.
No,
because that changes the meaning of the word Western.
Yeah, because it is located in the West,
yes,
and has a fully qualified
Bhikshuni Sangha.
I think please feel free to laugh at my syllogism. The subject Bande had no compassion for cats before she came to the Abbey because she had one cat pee on her.
That's a really good reason.
I think again you have to put it in. Pende is a person who because she is a person who. Okay, so say it like that. Yeah.
So I said, subject Pende is the person who had no compassion for cats before she came to the Abbey, because she's the person who had one cat pee on her.
Yeah. Okay. So that. Yeah. Okay. So start with the property. Yeah.
The property is the subject Pende. The predicate
a person who
is the predicate is the person who had no compassion.
I'm sorry. No, the reason you want the reason.
The reason is because she is the person who had a cat pee on her.
Okay, so Pende is a person who has had a cat pee on her. Okay, is that true? Okay. Then what's the privation?
If a person has a cat pee on,
if it's a person who had a cat pee on her,
then it's necessary that person has no compassion for
cats. Is that true?
Do you have compassion for cats now?
Yeah.
Well, that proves that's wrong.
Yeah.
One time.
Okay. Yeah. But still, just because a cat pees on you doesn't mean you necessarily have to lack compassion for cats. Yeah. Yeah. If that were so, then no mothers would have compassion for their kids, because the babies pee on the mothers all the time.
Try on for proving lack of compassion. So this is the subject. The American government does not have compassion because it has not repealed laws that allow the purchase of assault weapons after numerous mass shootings of school children.
Okay, then.
So the subject, the property, right? Right. So the subject is the American government. The predicate is it does not have compassion, and the reason is because it has not repealed laws that allow the purchase of assault weapons after numerous mass shootings of school children. So the property of the subject is the American government has not repealed laws that allow the purchase of assault weapons after numerous mass shootings of school children.
Okay, now is it the entire government who hasn't repealed the laws?
No, they don't all have to do law.
Hmm?
They have to say the Congress. People who have jurisdiction.
Yeah, but even the Congress, is it everybody in the Congress?
Well, they.
Who, you know, if you make your subject too broad, you're saying the entire American government has no compassion. Okay? So that means that, huh?
That means Larissa has no compassion.
Yeah, Larissa has no compassion because she's an employee of the American government. But, you know, who exactly is the American government?
Is it a person?
Is it a person?
Can they have compassion?
Yeah, are they? Yeah, can a government have compassion?
The property holds though, because there's no part of the American government that has repealed those laws. So any part of the government hasn't.
Okay, so if you haven't, but if you haven't repealed the laws, then you necessarily have no compassion.
No, I don't think the provision works. I'm just saying I think the property still works because there is no example of anything that's part of the U.S. government that has repealed those laws. They might want to.
Historically, there it is. Historically.
Yeah, well, the present.
Yeah, it's not presently.
Yeah.
But so it follows that a government cannot have compassion because it is not a person.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one. A government, you know, cannot have compassion because it's a person. It's not a person. Now go through that and see if that makes sense.
So a government is the subject, cannot have compassion is the predicate, and then because it is not a person is the reason. So the property of the subject is a government is not a person. Yeah. And whatever is not a person cannot have compassion.
What about, is that true? No. What's an example of something that...
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true because all persons are like animals and persons.
Oh yeah, and persons include Arya beings too.
No, wait a minute. What was our reason? Because
it is not a person.
Because it is not a person. So what about the mind of compassion? It doesn't have compassion? It's not a person. In other words, to have compassion, do you need to be a person? What about a mind? Can't a mind have compassion? Okay, you want to try again?
I don't know enough about U.S. governments to.
You could try with Singapore government.
Oh, it doesn't have compassion.
Okay. In the mental continuum of Jigme, there are fewer moments of manifest anger because I am frequently familiarizing with the antidotes to anger.
Because I have or because she has?
Because she has.
Okay.
She has.
Then
okay.
Go to it.
Subject is the mental continuum of Jigme. Predicate, there are fewer moments of manifest anger. The reason, because she is frequently familiarizing with the antidotes to anger.
Okay.
And then the property in her continuum, she is frequently familiarizing with the antidotes to anger.
Yeah. The property would be the mental continuum of Jigme is frequently familiarizing itself with anger. Take the she out of there.
Okay. The
antidotes
with the
to
antidotes to anger. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the pervasion is whoever is frequently familiarizing
or whatever. Yeah.
Or whatever is frequently familiarizing with the antidotes to anger, there are necessarily fewer moments of manifest anger.
As long as you're familiar, yeah, I mean, familiarization. That, yeah, is cause and effect, isn't it? No, do the whole thing. Yeah.
The whole thing again?
Yeah.
Okay. In the mental continuum of Jigme, there are fewer moments of manifest anger because she is frequently familiarizing with the antidotes to anger.
Jigme is a person.
Or
yeah, you say in the mental continuum of Jigme, that's not a subject.
Yeah. Preposition, not in.
Yeah, you have to take the inner.
So the mental,
or you say, like, if you do the one like on that mountain in the mental continuum of Jigme,
has,
yeah, there are fewer moments of
manifest anger
because
she has familiarized herself.
Yeah,
she has familiarized herself with the antidotes to anger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the mental continuum, on that mountain. On that mountain there.
Those are exist ones.
Yeah, those are exist ones.
Those are exist ones.
Right.
So if you just said the mental continuum of Jigme instead of in the.
If you said the mental continuum of Jigme has fewer moments of anger because it's a mental continuum that has been
frequently familiarized with the antidotes to anger.
Right.
That would be more.
Yeah. So put the mental continuum in both the subject and the reason.
Using the cause to prove the effect rather than the effect to prove the cause. So then you're assuming that effect's going to come from that cause, which he warns against with fire and smoke.
Yeah. But here, if I think it might work because if it's a continuum that's familiarized with the antidotes to anger, then it will be one that has fewer moments of anger.
I object.
Huh?
I object.
What? Like, okay, give an example.
See, it follows and then give a consequence.
Yeah.
You're assuming that you want to get rid of your anger.
Yeah, so?
That's an assumption.
Yeah, but so?
Just because you're familiarizing yourself with the antidotes doesn't mean you're trying to get rid of your anger.
No, but if you familiarize yourself with the antidotes,
right,
then you're going to have less anger.
Not necessarily.
Not
if you don't want to.
If you familiarize yourself with the
angry
antidotes,
person.
And applying.
And, but that, I think, yeah, I mean, well, that's what familiarizing means, that you're applying them again and again.
You can memorize them, but not use them.
Yes, that's it. You can memorize them.
Oh, okay. Okay. So because she's familiarizing and applying the antidotes. Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I have two they're along the same lines. They're about making a syllogism, saying something positive about your practice.
Mm-hmm.
The subject, my spiritual practice, or I can say the subject, Losong's spiritual practice, has not been fruitless because it has resulted has not been fruitless.
Okay.
I wanted to make one of them with negatives in it. The other one's more, okay. The subject, Losong's spiritual practice, has not been fruitless because it has resulted in him not getting angry very often.
Okay, then go through the parts.
So the subject is Losong's spiritual practice. The predicate has not been fruitless. And the reason is because it has resulted in him not getting angry very often.
Okay.
So the property of the subject is Losong's spiritual practice has resulted in him not getting angry very often. Now, I could say that's true, but very often is kind of a flimsy thing. But from my point of view,
you could
because,
say as often as before.
yeah,
Maybe.
which is kind of the wording in the next one. Whatever has resulted in Losang not getting angry as often as before.
No, whatever has, you don't have to put Losang in there.
Okay, whatever has resulted in not getting angry very as often has not been fruitless. Has necessarily not been fruitless.
Yeah, it might be better there to put a person in all three places too. Yeah.
Okay, a person whose spiritual practice.
Or you could say Losang spiritual practice
has not been fruitless because it has resulted.
No.
It resulted in him being a person who is not.
Losang spiritual practice is not a fruitless spiritual practice because it's a spiritual practice that has lessened anger. Maybe something like that.
Has not been fruitless because Losang spiritual practice has reduced its frequency.
Just because it's a spiritual practice that has lessened the frequency of anger. So Losang spiritual practice is a spiritual practice that has lessened anger. That would be the property. And then the privation would be, if it's a spiritual practice that has lessened anger, then it is necessarily not a spiritual practice that has been fruitless. Yeah.
Okay, the second one I have is kind of just a little different wording. The subject, my spiritual practice, has been beneficial because it has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past. So the subject will be my spiritual practice, and I could change it to be is a spiritual practice that has been beneficial, which would be the predicate. Mm-hmm. Because it has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past, which is the reason.
Or say, because it's a spiritual practice that has resulted.
Because it is a spiritual practice that has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past.
Okay, then.
So the property of the subject is, my spiritual practice is a spiritual practice that has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past. Mm-hmm. Should have seen me before. And the provision is, whatever has resulted in a kinder and happier, whatever is a spiritual practice that has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past, is a spiritual practice, is necessarily a spiritual practice that has been beneficial.
Sounds okay. Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask about this repeating of the subject, because it seems to me that if you say, because it has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude, blah, 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 you're referring to it. Yes. That implies Losang spiritual practice. So I wonder if you really need to say that again.
Yeah, but then when you go to do the privation, if the it is referring to Losang spiritual practice, then if it's Losang's spiritual practice that has resulted, then it's necessary.
See, that's where I think you say, if something has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest, mm-hmm. And then you really look to see, is that pervasive?
Mm-hmm.
So use it instead of.
Well, you just say, if something has resulted. Because then you're looking at this broader pervasion. You're not just talking about Losang anymore. You're talking about a broader pervasion.
You don't have to. You're not saying in the reason, the way he said it. It also is. You don't have to mention Losang.
But for instance, when we say take sound, it's a product because it's impermanent because it's a product. We don't say sounds product if it's sounds product, it's necessarily sounds impermanence. We just say if it's a product in general, it's impermanent in general. And
so but he's saying
do the same
if
thing.
it's Losang's spiritual practice, okay, then you're talking about a spiritual practice. So then are you going to say, if it's Losang, you're going to say Losang's spiritual practice is, you have to have a noun there.
Well, but what about if you compare that to sound as impermanent because it's a product?
You're
talking about something very general. If it's a product, it's necessarily impermanent. So I think that needs to apply in all syllogisms. We're not bringing the
Could
subject.
you reword the syllogism? I don't understand what you're getting at.
Well, the way he started, I think, Losang spiritual practice, that's a subject like sound.
Okay.
It has been beneficial because it has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past. So if something has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past, it has been beneficial. So then you really have to check, is that watertight? Is that a pervasion? Or does it necessarily depend on understanding that we're talking about Losang spiritual practice, in which case there's probably not pervasion, because many things could have resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being more manifest. Like
but we're just saying that if there's
if something has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past,
right,
then it necessarily has been beneficial. I think it has to be that general. You have to really check for pervasion.
Okay, that's okay. But what I'm getting at is you still have to have a noun there.
Why is that?
Because it is something that, not just because it...
Okay, so it is something. Rather than tying it to Losang spiritual practice, it is something that is resulted.
But it wasn't tied to his spiritual practice to start with.
I thought you were asking him to include his spiritual practice in the predicate and the subject.
No, just spiritual practice.
Yes.
It doesn't have to. Losang's spiritual practice is a spiritual practice that is beneficial because it is a spiritual practice that has, resulted in kindness or whatever. So the reason doesn't have the word Losang in it. Okay. It's talking about spiritual practices in general.
Okay.
Yeah. Which might be a little bit more watertight than saying it's something that has, because something could be, it's something that has resulted in what? In being happier. Yeah, well, something could be many different things. What?
There could be other things that are beneficial, but that doesn't preclude that from being. The way I had it worded, the property would be my spiritual practice has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see why that has to be a noun for a noun. It's a property. That's a property of my spiritual practice.
But if you say if it's okay, the property works, but then if the pervasion would be it's resulted because
the pervasion would be.
Well, no, what's your reason?
It has resulted in a kinder and happier attitude being manifest more often than in the past.
So then, if it has, let's shorten it. Yeah. But if it has resulted in a happier kind of attitude, has it necessarily been beneficial?
In the way that those are benefits, yes.
But
it might also have. You could say, it could also have negativities. But it has had benefits,
if somebody who's an alcoholic will say, because your pervasion then is, if it's resulted in a happier mind, then it's necessarily beneficial. So an alcoholic says, yeah, or, you know, a dopeaholic says, yeah, my dope has resulted in me having a kinder, happier mind, therefore it's beneficial. So that's what I'm getting at. If you make everything very broad, then there's the chance of other things being in there that contradict what you're trying to prove. Whereas if you keep saying spiritual practice, but losang is only at the subject, you know, the spiritual practice is mentioned in the three, then it seems to me it's a bit more watertight.
I want to say that's helpful. I'll go back and think about that, because when I was trying to formulate some of these progress syllogisms, I was like, I mean, it's not watertight. I could have gone to therapy and had the same result. And I was like, how do I know it's because of my Dharma practice? I mean, I know that's for me, yeah, but as in the provision, you know, like I blame myself less, or I'm less sensitive around certain things.
Right.
It's not tied to Dharma practice per
Right.
se.
Yeah. Because the same thing could have been... yeah, if the reason is because it's resulted in, well, anyway.
Since I fell in love, I'm a kinder, happier person.
Right. Yeah.
Short term.
Yeah.
I remember in social science statistics, they said that you can never prove causation. You can only prove correlation. So I'm wondering how that would reconcile with what we're doing here.
I don't know if what they say in statistics is true for everybody. I mean, is it true that you can never prove causation? That you can never prove that that seed grew into that flower? If you saw it, that you can never prove causation, you cannot say that my hitting that cannot be proved, even though you saw it. Yeah.
Well, it was specific to social science.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes a difference.
Might be talking about, specific things.
So I have a question about phrasing.
Praising or phrasing?
Phrasing.
Phrasing, okay.
So we want there to be a noun all the way through.
It just makes it clearer, it seems to me.
It does, but is it okay to have a verb clause as a reason?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes verb clauses are gerunds, can be nouns.
Yeah, like being a product, as opposed to because it is a product, because it's being a product.
Mine is Pema is a person who has no reason to fear her death because a person no longer exists after death.
Really? There's no person that exists after death?
Do I need to put she is a person who no longer exists after death?
But just because somebody's a person, that specific I doesn't exist after death, that means that somebody is not necessarily afraid of death?
Because what you're afraid of is the non-existence of that.
Maybe let's start at the beginning. Set it out, and then let's go through the three parts and the criteria. Okay?
So Pema is a person who has no reason to fear her death because she's a person who no longer exists after death.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then.
So the subject is Pema.
Mm-hmm.
Predicate, a person who has no reason to fear her death. And the reason is she is a person who no longer exists after death.
Mm-hmm.
Property is Pema is a person who no longer exists after death.
Mm-hmm.
If a person no longer exists after death, it necessarily means that there is no reason to fear death. Fear
the person's death.
Really? Because fearing your death happens before you die.
Yeah, so there's no reason to fear it if you don't exist.
Really?
Just because she has no reason to fear death doesn't mean that she wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
The argument
is that
is you
a valid
have reason.
for not fearing death? Because the specific I won't exist in the next life? Is that a valid reason for not fearing death now before in this life?
I might fear death anyway because I'm a little scared of the actual dying process.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I could see that it wouldn't matter what's happening later. Just the going through it is a little like, what's that? I could fear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because just saying the specific person, Pema, won't exist after death doesn't mean that the specific person, Pema, is going to be fearless before she dies.
To prove that there is no reason to fear your death.
Right. Not that I won't fear death.
Yes.
Okay, but doesn't
there's no good reason to fear your death.
Okay, but what kind of fear are you talking about?
That the fear of non-existence of that specific person, because that person does not exist. It is a fact that that person does not exist.
Uh-huh.
So there's no reason to fear it.
So just because that specific person doesn't exist, but then necessarily she's not going to fear.
There's no reason to fear. There's no good reason to fear if the fact is.
No, but there is a good reason because the continuum of that person will exist in the future life.
I thought the usual reason given of not having to fear the annihilation of it's usually not to fear the annihilation of a permanent or inherently existent person that you grasp at because that person never existed in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. That's the wisdom. That's the reason usually given, right?
Yeah, usually. Yeah, because you're aware that there's a continuum in the future, or even just, if you're aware that there's a continuum of the person and the consciousness in the future, then, for somebody who is fearing going out of existence totally, if they think, but there's a continuum afterwards, then that will help quench their fear of annihilation. It doesn't mean it will quench all their fear of death, because like she said, it could be you're afraid of the dying process, you're afraid of what you're going to be reborn as. I don't think so. But keep thinking about that and come up with one that works.
I thought it worked for my mind.
According to you, if that one worked, then you should be able to, then your grandma wouldn't have any fear of death. But she's afraid of death, probably, don't you think?
But she will not understand the reason.
Mm.
She will not agree with it. Because she will think that she exists.
Yeah.
Actually, interestingly, she might not fear death so much because she thinks she will exist. In the house with all the houses that she's burned and living there. So I don't know about that fear of.
What do you mean?
The belief that you burn the houses and the houses go to hell and then you get to live there.
Oh, in the
with
houses.
All your relatives.
Okay, but why does it have to be in hell?
That's the belief.
Yeah, but that's assuming everybody goes to hell.
Well, that's the belief. So that's why I don't think it's like she would actually really fear death itself.
But just because people have some fabricated belief doesn't mean at the time of death they're not going to fear death. Yeah.
Then you go to hell, then you wait for a chance, and you get reincarnated. But then you burn.
Whatever you burn appears in that form in the hell realm that you're in. So you can burn a cell phone. You in the hell, your relative in the hell realm.
Yeah, but usually they burn it you don't burn it for yourself before you die. Usually somebody else burns it for you after you die. You know, so that's why they burn all this bank of hell money. Yeah, bills, bank of hell, because they assume everybody's going to hell. And then they burn it, and then it's supposed to appear in the hell realm and in your account. It doesn't get mixed up and go in somebody else's account accidentally.
That's to use while you're there.
To use while you're in your hellish rebirth.
You burn 3-story mansions with servants and cars. It's really, really weird.
Yeah.
What religion is this? What religion is this?
This is ancestor worship. Ancestor worship. Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. We're going to read some after this question.
Someone online suggested that to rephrase Venerable Pema's statement, she doesn't fear the non-existence of the conventional self. So I'm not sure what the...
Yeah, because what's the
she
whole
shouldn't
syllogism?
fear, or she doesn't fear death because she doesn't fear the non-existence of the conventional self.
Yeah. So you don't fear the non-existence of the conventional self?
Who does that?
You know, again, just because somebody has an intellectual reason that they give themselves, yeah, oh, my conventional self isn't going to go out of existence, so therefore I don't need to fear death. Does that necessarily mean that they're not going to fear death?
You know, we talk about if this were a correct reason, if there was a correct respondent, they would necessarily have realized that property of the subject, that, what was it, there's no existence.
That the conventional self is not.
Yeah, that the conventional self does not exist. Or
is not going to go out of existence. Okay, let's read. Yeah, okay. Having said that, it is not necessary to have a full and final understanding of the topics before you can go on. If we get hung up on trying to understand definitively exactly what is meant by selflessness or a permanent phenomena, we will not get very far. So the request I have for you here is simply to learn this material and to think about it, and doubtless you will be thinking about it, as it is hard to avoid doing so. The reason I make this request is that it will be impossible to gain the skills of Buddhist reasoning and debate using this book if you do not understand the terminology as it is used in the tradition. So that seems contradictory because it seems like you do have to understand the terminology. So first develop your skills to make sure you have a good solid procedure in reasoning, and then you can use these skills to figure out what exactly exists. Again, let your epistemology inform your ontology, not the other way around. Any other approach is not really sensible. Can someone explain that? Let your epistemology, how you perceive things, inform your ontology, how things exist. I don't know. Anybody understand what he's saying?
I've looked that up about Me too.
Okay, anyway, we'll keep going. Any other approach is not really sensible. You're right. What you said is not really sensible. The Buddhist ontology presented here is reckoned from the point of view of the collected topics literature. The study of the collected topics is the general introduction to reliable cognition, meaning logic and epistemology. Epistemology is how you perceive things. Huh? Yeah, how you know things and perceive them. And also includes introductions to several other topics of philosophy, such as basic ontology, cause and effect, generalities, or a synonym for that is universals, and instances or particulars, introductory consciousness studies. That's an interesting phrase, an introductory consciousness study. I know what he means, but if I didn't know what he means, I wouldn't understand that. And Buddhist reasoning forms. Together, these introduce students to the study of Buddhist and non-Buddhist systems of tenets in support of developing wisdom on the spiritual path. As mentioned earlier, this collected topics ontology is based on the Buddhist philosophical system, or the tenet system known as the Sutra school. Okay, so that's the Sautantrika. So sometimes it comes up because we learn reasoning and low rig and all these kinds of things. Yeah, and then when you start studying Prasangika Banyamaka, you have Chandakirti kind of dismissing all this stuff that is from the Sutra school. Okay, so then the question comes up, well, why don't we just learn it from the viewpoint of the Sutra school to start with? Okay, Prasangika, yeah, sorry, from the Prasangika school to start with. Which I think in terms of epistemology could have a good reason, but His Holiness says it's because the mass of the literature talking about that is written from the viewpoint of the Sutra school, from the viewpoint of Sautantrika. So since the mass of literature is written from that viewpoint, then that's how we learn it first. Okay, and then we refine it by learning the Prasangika version later. Yeah.
This kind of matters here. I did try to figure out that epistemology leading your ontology. And what I understood for that is kind of related to what you're saying. In the way what I finally came to is like, you can't really try to decide what exists until you figure out how you're going to figure that out. So you have to have a method. So the epistemology is, how do we know what we know? When you come up with some kind of method that you think is sound, then you can figure out what exists. You can't go the other way.
Yeah.
And so this thing about, I think it relates to also why they lay it out this way a little bit too, because then you're learning something that you can kind of sink your teeth into, that you could actually understand, and then you're refining it as you go through the systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Following reasoning, is the tenet system known as the Sutra school following reasoning, or Sautantrika. Okay, but rather than trying to learn much about the tenet systems here, gain a familiarity with this basic debate procedure first, and then look into these topics to the extent you wish. So that's exactly the point here. Okay. Having said that, in Foundations of Buddhist Practice, I explained it according to the Prasangika view, because that's the way went in the session when I was asking His Holiness what he presented. And then I referred to, in a footnote, this or somewhere in the text, this is usually taught from the other view, and many of you may become may have become familiar with that and think this is wrong, but it isn't. Yeah, because sometimes you learn that so well that then when you encounter the Prasangika view, you say, that's wrong, because you learned it in a certain way. Yeah. In the collected topics tradition of Buddhist reasoning and debate, the usual way of explaining a topic includes presentation of the definitions, the divisions of the phenomena, and illustrations or examples. It is essential to put these in mind in order to be able to understand the few topics introduced here, practice the debates, and gain the skills. Think of this approach as looking for the essential characteristics of things. In fact, in Tibetan, the study of philosophy is known as seni, meaning definitions, characteristics, or qualities. Yeah? So when we say seni, we often are referring to debate, but it actually means definition, or it can mean characteristics or qualities. If you think that seems a quaint way of studying philosophy, think of the analysis of whether or not a tomato is a fruit, whether or not glass is liquid, and whether or not Pluto is a planet. Thinking about the divisions of things can be very elucidating. For instance, in thinking of the students in a university, it tells us a lot about the school when we consider the different ways that the students in that school may be divided. First, we might divide the the students into males and females. Then we might divide them into graduate students and undergraduate students, in-state students and out-of-state students, U.S. citizens and foreign visitors, and so on. You might divide them by majors, by ethnic groups, by sexual orientation, and so on. When we look at these many divisions, it certainly helps to build up an image of the school. This is true for all groups of phenomena. If you are trying to discern the essential characteristics of things, it is important to sort out what is included and what is excluded. Finally, the presentation of topics in the collected topics literature will always include examples or illustrations, that is, things that are that thing, as a spider is an arachnid. Okay? So this is very interesting, saying that if you divide things in many different ways, the more different ways you can divide things, the more information it gives you about what that thing is. So that example of the school, because now we're going to divide the selfless, and there are many different ways to divide the selfless. Yeah, or actually many different ways to divide the existent, And so if we learn all these different ways to divide the existent, then we get a much fuller understanding of what it means. Yeah, is that clear? I have written this chapter according to an outline. Basically, it tracks alongside the definitions, divisions, and illustrations or examples of the phenomena discussed. This style of presentation follows the Indian and Tibetan style, but it may seem obscure if you are not used to it. There is a scheme for formatting headings differently at different levels, but I know from experience that formatting different heading levels distinctively by itself is not usually enough to tip off the reader where we are. You would have to read as closely as a Talmudic scholar to sort out the different heading levels based simply on their appearance. And if you cannot do that, it sometimes seems to the reader as if the text is jumping around and is disconnected. So rather than trying to make all the heading levels different in appearance, I have taken 2 steps to make the organization more accessible. First, in this chapter and the next, I have marked the headings with their levels, number 1 through 7, as an HL1, HL2, heading level 1, heading level 2, and so on. Second, in each of these 2 chapters, I also present the outline the chapter follows as an easy guide for the reader. Here is the outline for this chapter. Now, I know for me, what helps me understand better is not to have it all in one straight line like that, with heading levels at the side. Yeah, I know for me, it's easier if we have things and then the different levels are indented, or if they're numbered. So it's like then you could, like in the Precious Garland, and how they number many outlines, So you might have 1.1, 1.1.1, and then under the lower 1.1.2, and then its subdivisions. And so there I have a visual thing. I can see how long the numbers are, and then mark in colors kind of the different things. So his way of doing it here,
It's better in the book.
is it?
Much better in the book.
Oh, because here everything is just
The book,
all.
yes.
Oh, it does? Oh, okay, because here it's all flush left. Oh, that's much better. Much better. Okay. Yeah. Kindle didn't get it. Yeah, Kindle,
But not much.
Okay. Yeah, so that's much better.
My Kindle has indentations.
It does?
Mine too.
Oh, mine doesn't do that.
Well, she has an iPad.
I don't have an iPad.
Yeah. No, mine, look. It's all. Yeah. So. Okay, so if I get lost, then.
We can make a copy very quickly.
Yeah, maybe for next week. That would be good. But it would be very nice if somebody took that, and then as we get the different definitions and divisions, then inserted them right. Put the definitions right there with the words in the outline. Yeah. Okay. Because here, the big heading is the selfless. And then underneath that, the definition of the selfless, the divisions of the selfless. And then I guess it's hard to tell here. Huh?
There's a C, so the last thing in the outline is the next one.
Oh, yeah, examples of the selfless. Yeah, that's at the very end. Then I guess under divisions of the selfless, we have existence, okay, which has 3 categories. The definition of an existent, phenomena mutually inclusive with existence, and 7 divisions of existence. And then it looks like, see, I can't, when it's all flush left, I can't tell what's what. But it looks under
divisions of
existence, there's the division of existence into impermanent phenomena, permanent phenomena. And then, oh, thank you. Okay, so this is much better. So the division of existence into impermanent phenomena and permanent phenomena, that's one way. The division of existence into functioning things and phenomena that are non-things. The division of existence into products and non-produced phenomena. The division into composed phenomena and uncomposed phenomena. The division into ultimate truths and conventional truths. The division into specifically characterized phenomena and generally characterized phenomena, and the division of into hidden phenomena and manifest phenomena. Okay, so that's 7 ways of dividing it. Of dividing existence. Okay, but but then. Okay, so then if we look under the 7 divisions, so the first one is permanent and impermanent. So then under impermanent phenomena, we have the definition of what it is and examples. Under permanent, also definition and examples. And also a division of permanent phenomena and examples of permanent phenomena. It's interesting why they divided permanent phenomena, gave divisions for permanent phenomena, but not divisions for impermanent phenomena. That's strange. Okay, then under the top, do you want me to go through this just to familiarize? Okay. Then under dividing it into functioning things and phenomena that are non-things, under functioning things, definition and the divisions, and then under then there's just phenomena that are non-things. Yeah. It's interesting, the word non-thing in Tibetan can mean, it doesn't necessarily say phenomena that are non-things, but just non-things can have many, many different meanings. Yeah? When you're reading a text and you come across that word, it's sometimes very difficult to tell what is actually meant by a non-thing. Okay, then the other ones don't have any divisions. Then under, okay, so if we look at non-existence, that's parallel with existence and non-existence. And then there's a proposed definition of the non-existent and examples of non-existence. Okay. And then examples of the selfless. So I've always wondered, could you say that the category of non-existent exists? It's an empty set because you can't, what are you going to put under, put all your rabbit's horns there and sky flowers there and, but just the topic of, you pass that back to her, of non-existence. He seems to imply in the book that it doesn't exist, but I wonder, you have an idea on it?
Maybe next week I'll bring the thing from Roger's book. She has a little section about this thing with non-existence. I don't know if they're talking about the category. It came down to that whichever way you debated it, you had problems on either side, but maybe I'll see if I can find it and send it to you and see if you think it's worth.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Okay, so it's time to stop now, and this is a good place. So we're stopping with the selfless. Yeah. And some people object to that translation because they say in English, when we hear selfless, we think of somebody who's compassionate. And so that this letter can be quite misleading. And so that's why they usually translate it in Pali literature as no self or non-self. Just the Sanskrit Pali word is the same, but different translations. Oh, homework for next week. Keep on with your syllogism writing. Because it's good, isn't it? Are you learning a lot from doing this? Yeah, I think we're learning quite a bit from trying to make our own syllogisms. Yeah?
Oh, and I wanted to tell you.
What?
All these years of learning the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths and all of those syllogisms there, I just did not get what they were trying to communicate. And finally, I don't understand them yet, but I understand what they're trying to communicate and what that means. It's, I was so thrilled.
Good, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's why this kind of stuff is often studied at the beginning so that you have the tools to apply when you come to different topics.